Helen, what's the evidence that Lenin was involved in this decision to kill the Romanovs?
The revelation began with a quiet but electrifying announcement from a team of geneticists who had spent years poring over fragments of bone, degraded tissue, and the lingering mysteries that had haunted 20th century history. For generations, the fate of the last Russian imperial family, Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, and their 5 children, had been clouded by rumors, speculation, imposters, conspiracy theories, and unanswered questions. Historians could reconstruct the political events surrounding their downfall with precision, but the intimate truth of what transpired in their final moments remained concealed behind conflicting testimonies and the physical absence of definitive evidence. When scientists finally revealed the DNA results that resolved the puzzle once and for all, the world was stunned not only by the clarity of the findings, but also by the layers of historical meaning that suddenly snapped into place. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The Romanov story had always possessed a near-mythic intensity. It combined the opulence of imperial Russia with the brutality of revolution, the fragility of a family caught between eras, and the persistent belief that at least one child might have been spirited away to safety. That belief fueled novels, films, hoaxes, and impassioned debates for nearly a century. Even as scholars insisted the odds of survival were minuscule, a lingering sense of uncertainty allowed space for hope. When human remains were uncovered in the forests near Yekaterinburg decades after the execution, many expected the mystery to close quickly. Instead, incomplete discoveries, missing bones, and limitations in early testing methods created new ambiguity. It was only with the rapid advancements in forensic genetics in the early 21st century that scientists gained the tools necessary to confront the mystery comprehensively. The team began by revisiting the remains found in 2 separate burial sites, each containing partial sets of bones that had clearly belonged to individuals executed together. Early examinations linked several of the remains to Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters. Yet 2 children, most famously the youngest daughter, whose story had been entangled with legends of escape, were unaccounted for. This absence became the core of the public's imagination. Could one or both of the missing children have fled the chaos of revolution? Could the countless claims of survivors have contained a kernel of truth? The lack of complete remains opened the door to speculation, and without absolute scientific confirmation, the myth persisted. Advances in mitochondrial DNA analysis became the turning point. Mitochondrial DNA, passed down maternally, can remain remarkably stable across generations even when other genetic material has deteriorated. Scientists were able to compare samples from the remains with DNA from living maternal relatives of the Tsarina, as well as preserved genetic material from Nicholas himself secured through medical samples stored before the revolution. This allowed researchers to establish biological relationships among the remains with unprecedented accuracy. In earlier decades, the degraded quality of the bones had limited what could be examined, but newer techniques enabled the extraction of genetic strands thought to be unrecoverable. The analysis began producing matches so precise and so consistent that margin of error shrank close to 0. Every piece of genetic evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. The remains from the original burial held the Tsar, the Tsarina, and 3 of their daughters. The second set of remains, uncovered in a separate, smaller grave, belonged to the missing children, the Tsarevich Alexei and the remaining daughter. The discovery instantly closed the possibility that anyone in the family had escaped. It resolved decades of debate surrounding the identity of individuals who had claimed lineage and put to rest the most persistent historical myth surrounding the Romanov legacy. The implications of the findings were immense. One of the most significant was the confirmation that the entire family had indeed been executed together, contradicting the array of accounts that suggested one or more children might have survived the chaos of that night. Historians had long suspected this outcome based on documented orders and witness testimonies, yet the absence of complete physical evidence had left an opening for alternative theories. That opening served as fertile ground for elaborate narratives, each one imagining a different fate for the missing Romanov children. DNA evidence eliminated the ambiguity with an authority that no document or testimony could match. The results also provided new insight into the nature of the execution and the subsequent handling of the bodies. By examining the condition of the remains, forensic experts could infer the methods used to conceal the evidence, the hurried decisions made by the perpetrators, and the chaotic environment of those final hours. It became clear that the separations between the bodies were not signs of escape or survival, but rather the disjointed actions of those tasked with disposing of the family. The DNA analysis therefore not only solved the identity puzzle, but also deepened understanding of the historical context surrounding the Romanovs' final moments. Perhaps most striking was the way the findings reshaped public memory. The Romanov mystery had persisted so long because it existed at the intersection of tragedy, politics, and fantasy. Without definitive closure, people naturally filled the void with imagined possibilities. DNA analysis functioned as a technological antidote to that ambiguity. The emotional resonance of the results was profound. With the scientific facts firmly established, the Romanov story shifted from one of speculation to one of stark historical truth. The finality forced a collective reimagining of the narrative, less a tale of potential survival and more a tragic emblem of political upheaval. The scientific breakthrough also transformed the field of historical forensics. The Romanovs became a landmark case demonstrating how modern genetics can reach beyond the limits of lost records and fragmented remains. Researchers began to view the case as proof that long-standing mysteries, once considered unsolvable, might yield to persistent investigation and technological advancement. The techniques refined through the Romanov analysis later influenced other forensic efforts, from identifying victims of past conflicts to resolving cold cases that had baffled investigators for years. By solving a century-old mystery, scientists opened new pathways for uncovering truths buried in the past. The revelation also carried unexpected emotional weight for descendants of related families and individuals whose identities had been questioned publicly for decades. Over the years, those claiming Romanov heritage, some sincerely convinced, others knowingly deceptive, had woven themselves into the fabric of the mystery. DNA analysis dispelled these claims with finality. For some, the results ended long personal journeys shaped by belief in a connection that did not exist. For others, the clarity brought relief, cutting through decades of doubt. The scientific truth, though cold in its precision, provided a form of closure that no amount of historical debate could achieve. The profound clarity of the findings also prompted reconsideration of Imperial Russia's last chapter. The Romanovs had been depicted through a spectrum of lenses: symbols of an outdated monarchy, victims of political violence, figures shrouded in romanticized innocence, or participants in their own downfall through resistance to reform. With the mystery of their fate resolved, discussions about the family became more grounded. Historians, freed from the need to parse competing theories of survival, could instead focus on the wider implications of their fall, the social landscape of the time, and the forces that had shaped the revolution. Scientists working on the case often described the moment of confirmation as both exhilarating and sobering. The Romanov story had captured global attention, but behind it was a family whose final days were marked by fear, isolation, and uncertainty. The genetic evidence illuminated the intimate reality of their fate, bringing humanity into sharper focus. The analysis did not merely solve a puzzle, it re-established the Romanovs as individuals whose existence had been overshadowed by myth. By returning them to factual history, the scientists restored a sense of dignity to their memory. The discovery also underscored the potential of collaboration across disciplines. Geneticists, forensic anthropologists, historians, archivists, and archaeologists worked together to interpret the data. Each perspective enriched the analysis, allowing the team to consider not only biological relationships, but also contextual details that shaped the understanding of the remains. This collaborative model echoed through the scientific community, showcasing how multifaceted historical investigations can become when experts from different fields unite around a single mystery. The case also highlighted the fragility of historical truth in eras without modern documentation. Without official confirmation, stories can morph into legends, fueled by circumstance and imagination. The Romanov mystery demonstrated how easily uncertainty can reshape collective memory. The DNA analysis acted as a corrective, an anchor that fixed the narrative firmly in verifiable facts. This served as a reminder that historical mysteries, no matter how entrenched in culture, can be resolved through scientific perseverance. On a broader cultural level, the results challenge the way society interacts with legends. The Romanovs had been a canvas onto which many projected their hopes, fears, and fantasies. The possibility of a surviving heir had long symbolized the idea that history might carry hidden miracles or unexpected twists. By dispelling that possibility, the DNA evidence encouraged a more grounded approach to interpreting unresolved stories from the past. It did not diminish the emotional richness of the Romanov saga, but rather redirected attention toward the real forces that shaped it: politics, ideology, and the human consequences of revolution. The findings also illuminated the challenges of working with genetically degraded material. Extracting viable DNA from remains exposed to harsh environmental conditions required cutting-edge methods that were still developing at the time. Researchers perfected new techniques for isolating mitochondrial fragments, identifying contamination, and reconstructing incomplete sequences. These methods later became standard practice in forensic science, demonstrating how a historic case can drive innovation that benefits countless other investigations. The Romanov analysis became a landmark example of how science evolves in response to unique challenges. The emotional resonance of solving such a long-standing mystery rippled through academic circles as well. Scholars who had studied the Romanovs for their entire careers suddenly found themselves in possession of irrefutable evidence that clarified long-debated uncertainties. The new information prompted revisions in scholarly works, museum exhibits, and educational materials. It also provided a rare opportunity to revisit archival documents with fresh perspective. When the genetic evidence aligned with certain historical accounts, those sources gained new credibility. Conversely, testimonies that conflicted with the DNA findings were reevaluated and contextualized more critically. Another profound implication was the way the findings bridged the gap between history and modern identity. The Romanov family, though part of a distant imperial lineage, had become a global cultural symbol. Their story resonated across borders, shaping perceptions of monarchy, revolution, and familial loyalty. Resolving the mystery strengthened that resonance by giving the narrative a completed arc. It offered a sense of continuity in world history, connecting the dramatic upheavals of the early 20th century to contemporary scientific capabilities. The results also spurred broader public interest in genetic genealogy. Many people, captivated by the idea that DNA could solve a century-old mystery, became more aware of the power of genetic information. This contributed to a rise in curiosity about ancestry testing, individual heritage, and forensic science. Although the Romanov case operated on a far more sophisticated level than consumer genealogy, the cultural effect was unmistakable. People became more attuned to the idea that personal and historical truths could be uncovered through biological traces, even when all other evidence had faded. Beyond science and scholarship, the revelation also carried symbolic weight in relation to Russia's evolving relationship with its past. The Romanov dynasty occupied a complex position in national memory. Some viewed the family as emblematic of a gilded age of aristocratic excess, others as tragic figures caught in the machinery of political change. Solving the mystery allowed for a more grounded acknowledgement of their historical significance, unclouded by speculation about their fate. It contributed to ongoing discussions about reconciliation with the past, historical accountability, and the way societies commemorate transformative events. The case also offered a deeper understanding of the human dimension of revolution. The Romanovs' demise encapsulated the tragic intersection of personal lives and political upheaval. DNA analysis, in a sense, returned the focus to the individuals themselves. By confirming their identities and fate, the research illuminated the vulnerability of human lives swept up in historical forces beyond their control. The findings underscored the harsh realities of regimes in transition and the often forgotten human cost behind major political shifts. As the full implications of the DNA confirmation settled into public consciousness, the Romanov mystery took on a new life, not as a story of escape or enduring legend, but as a testament to the power of truth emerging from the shadows of history. The finality of the results allowed the narrative to be told without hesitation, grounded in facts rather than speculation. It demonstrated that even the most compelling legends cannot withstand the precision of modern science when evidence is available to be examined. The solving of the Romanov mystery through DNA analysis stands as one of the most remarkable intersections of history and science. It revealed that when technological advancement meets persistent inquiry, answers once deemed impossible can be uncovered with astonishing clarity. The discovery did more than identify remains. It reshaped understanding, corrected long-standing misconceptions, deepened historical insight, and brought closure to one of the most enigmatic episodes of the 20th century. It also left a lasting mark on the scientific community, proving that even the most fragmented past can be reconstructed with steadfast dedication and the right tools. What emerged was a complete narrative, solidified through evidence that transcended speculation. The Romanovs, once the subject of countless rumors and imaginative retellings, were finally situated within the realm of confirmed history. The weight of scientific truth carried far-reaching consequences, compelling the world to confront the reality of their fate with new solemnity. The mystery that had captivated generations was no longer a puzzle waiting to be solved, but a completed chapter of history, illuminated with precision and preserved with certainty. The story endures not because of the myths that once surrounded it, but because of the profound achievement that brought the truth to light. By bridging a century of uncertainty, the DNA analysis transformed a tale of lost potential and lingering questions into a testament to the enduring capacity of science to reveal clarity where history left shadows. The revelation of the Romanov identities through DNA analysis did more than close a historical chapter. It initiated an extraordinary second wave of inquiry that moved beyond the question of who the remains belonged to and into deeper examinations of how science, memory, and cultural imagination intertwine. Once the initial impact settled, scholars, scientists, and the wider public found themselves confronted with entirely new avenues of interpretation. These avenues did not rehash old mysteries, but instead expanded understanding of the broader forces at play, forces involving political symbolism, the evolution of forensic science, and the way societies internalize the past. The Romanov case thus became a catalyst for exploring dimensions of history rarely brought to the foreground when so much energy had previously been tied up in the basic question of identity. One of the most intriguing consequences of the DNA revelation was the shift in how historians approach the Romanov narrative. Freed from the burden of unresolved identity, researchers began focusing more intensely on the cultural environment that had sustained the myths for so many decades. The scientific conclusion compelled a reevaluation of why certain legends persisted so stubbornly, even in the face of contradictory evidence. This introspection led to new studies examining the psychological and socio-political reasons that societies cling to unresolved narratives. In many ways, the Romanov case became a mirror through which to observe how hope, trauma, and ideological conflict shape collective memory. Scholars found that the endurance of the survival myths said as much about global attitudes toward monarchy, revolution, and romanticized tragedy as it did about the family itself. The story's resolution also brought renewed attention to the role of political transitions in shaping national mythology. Russia, in particular, had undergone numerous shifts in identity since the fall of the Romanov dynasty, and each era interpreted the imperial past through its own ideological lens. When the DNA analysis eliminated ambiguity, it forced a clearer confrontation with the finality of the imperial line's end. This had implications beyond mere historical accuracy. It influenced conversations about national identity, prompting deeper reflection on the relationship between past and present. The Romanov case thus helped illustrate how certain unresolved histories serve as emotional anchors for societies navigating their own uncertainties. Another dimension that gained prominence was the technical evolution of forensic methods. Scientists who had worked on the Romanov case frequently cited it as a turning point, not only because of the specific findings, but because it demonstrated the value of patience and iterative improvement in scientific inquiry. The initial examinations of the Romanov remains in the late 20th century were groundbreaking at the time, yet they lacked the precision that later advancements would provide. The subsequent DNA analysis, with far more sophisticated tools, highlighted how rapidly the field can progress within a few decades. This provided a compelling case study for scientific institutions seeking to demonstrate the importance of ongoing investment in research infrastructure. It also emphasized that forensic science is not static, but continually evolving, often transforming our understanding of historical events long after the fact. The Romanov analysis contributed significantly to ethical discussions in forensic science as well. The handling of historically significant remains is always fraught with sensitive questions. Questions involving respect for the deceased, the responsibilities of scientific institutions, and the rights of nations or families connected to the individuals in question. The Romanov case became a benchmark for how such debates should unfold. It showcased how careful coordination between governments, religious institutions, scientists, and historians can create a framework that balances scientific discovery with cultural sensitivity. The protocols established during the investigation influenced later decisions concerning the examination of other historical remains, offering a model that could be adapted across different cultural contexts. Beyond the scientific and historical spheres, the resolution of the Romanov mystery prompted a notable cultural shift in how people perceive authenticity in storytelling. For decades, fictional adaptations of the Romanov saga thrived on the possibility of hidden heirs and undiscovered truths. Once DNA evidence made those scenarios impossible, creators found themselves rethinking the themes they wanted to explore. Rather than relying on the allure of survival myths, new interpretations began focusing more on emotional depth, psychological nuance, and the human side of the tragedy. This marked a transition away from treating the Romanovs as mythical figures toward portraying them as people caught in the storm of history. The shift in creative focus influenced literature, film, theater, and even museum exhibitions, inspiring works that explored the complexities of imperial decline and revolutionary upheaval without leaning on speculative narratives. The revelation also spurred conversations about how modern societies engage with historical evidence. The Romanov case offered a dramatic demonstration of how scientific truth can directly confront long-held beliefs. In many ways, it became a case study in public reactions to definitive evidence, illustrating the challenges that accompany the transition from uncertainty to clarity. People who had grown up with the myth of a surviving Romanov child experienced a sudden reorientation. Some felt liberated by the closure, while others felt a pang of loss, as though a beloved story had slipped away. This emotional complexity sparked discussions about why humans form attachments to historical mysteries and how these attachments influence popular understanding of the past. The Romanov DNA results thus became a tool for psychologists and sociologists studying the interplay between history, belief, and identity. The case also influenced international approaches to genetic identification during humanitarian efforts. Though the Romanovs were not victims of modern conflict, the scientific methods used to identify them proved relevant to countless cases involving mass fatalities, missing persons, and historical injustices. Human rights organizations and forensic teams studying historical massacres began adopting similar DNA techniques to provide closure for families and communities affected by large-scale tragedies. The Romanov case, with its intricate DNA reconstruction, demonstrated that even remains with severe degradation could yield meaningful results. This encouraged broader confidence in forensic identification programs around the world, especially in regions dealing with the long-term consequences of conflict or political violence. As forensic success inspired new efforts, archivists and historians revisited political documents from the final years of Imperial Russia. Many of these documents had been dismissed or overlooked for decades because they contradicted popular narratives or lacked corroborating evidence. The scientific results compelled scholars to contextualize these materials with renewed seriousness. Diplomatic correspondences, secret police reports, and personal diaries gained new relevance, allowing for a richer reconstruction of the events leading up to the family's imprisonment and execution. This renewed archival attention revealed details not widely known before, not about survival myths, but about the political pressures, internal disagreements, and logistical failures that shaped the chaotic final months of the imperial government. The DNA results did not merely solve an identity question, they ignited a wave of deeper archival exploration that expanded understanding of the era. The aftermath of the scientific conclusion also reshaped discussions about the relationship between monarchy and modernity. The Romanovs represented a form of governance and cultural order that was struggling to survive in a rapidly changing world. By confirming the tragic finality of their fate, the DNA analysis encouraged scholars to reevaluate the symbolic meanings that had become attached to the family. The Romanovs had often served as archetypes of doomed royalty, representing the tension between tradition and revolution. With the mystery resolved, the narrative was reoriented away from speculative hope and toward historical context. This provided an opportunity to examine how monarchies adapt, or fail to adapt, to modern pressures, offering lessons that extended far beyond Russia's borders. Perhaps one of the more surprising developments following the DNA revelation was the renewed interest in examining the personal lives of the Romanovs with greater intimacy and nuance. Historical mysteries often overshadow human detail, and the focus on survival theories had long eclipsed deeper study of the family's interpersonal relationships, private dynamics, and emotional experiences. Once the identity question was conclusively answered, historians and biographers began producing works that explored lesser-known aspects of their lives. Their intellectual interests, their medical struggles, their private letters, and their attempts to maintain a sense of normalcy during captivity. This approach humanized the family in ways that previous generations had not emphasized, offering insights into how individuals navigate catastrophic political transitions on a deeply personal level. The scientific resolution also influenced the way educators taught the fall of the Romanov dynasty. Previously, classrooms often dedicated substantial time to the mystery of the missing children, partly because it captured student interest and partly because it represented a genuine historical question. With the mystery solved, educational materials shifted toward broader themes. The socioeconomic conditions that fueled revolutionary unrest, the limitations of autocratic rule, the rise of new political ideologies, and the global ripple effects of the revolution. This shift allowed the Romanov story to serve as a lens for understanding wider historical patterns, rather than as a singular tragedy defined by unanswered questions. Museums around the world also adapted. Exhibits that once centered on the lingering mystery began redesigning their presentations to incorporate the scientific findings. Some institutions created immersive installations explaining the DNA process, illustrating how bone fragments could hold answers for an entire century. Others used the newfound clarity as an opportunity to explore lesser-known facets of the era, such as the experiences of servants, political prisoners, or lesser nobility caught in the turbulence of revolution. The Romanov case thus enriched cultural institutions by inspiring narratives that moved beyond myth-making and toward comprehensive historical interpretation. The resolution of the Romanov identities also had implications for discussions of scientific responsibility. As public fascination with forensic genetics grew, scientists faced the challenge of explaining complex processes in accessible terms without compromising accuracy. The Romanov case featured heavily in discussions about transparency in scientific communication. The need to convey results in a way that honored public interest while maintaining scientific rigor helped refine communication strategies now used by forensic experts worldwide. It reinforced the importance of clear explanations, ethical considerations, and collaborative discourse in the presentation of scientific findings. The influence of the case extended into the field of bioarchaeology as well. Researchers examining ancient remains adopted similar methodologies to extract genetic information from samples once considered too damaged for analysis. The Romanovs became an example of how technological persistence can overcome physical limitations that previously hindered historical research. This new confidence allowed scientists to explore broader questions about ancestry, migration, cultural exchange, and population changes across centuries. The Romanov DNA analysis thus played a part in expanding scientific curiosity across multiple disciplines, encouraging researchers to revisit previously abandoned inquiries. The case also became relevant to ongoing conversations about political transparency. The Romanov execution had originally been obscured by secrecy, conflicting accounts, and political agendas. The eventual scientific revelation, coming many decades later, illustrated how truth can be delayed by political motives. This sparked academic discussions about the importance of preserving open access to historical records, encouraging accountability, and confronting difficult chapters of national history rather than allowing them to linger unresolved. The Romanov case served as an example of how time, technology, and persistence can eventually pierce through even the thickest layers of political opacity. As the implications of the DNA findings continued to unfold, scholars began exploring how the Romanov story fit into global patterns of historical myth-making. Similar mysteries in other nations, lost heirs, vanished nobles, disputed remains, were re-examined with fresh perspective. The Romanov case demonstrated how myths can flourish in environments where documentation is suppressed or destroyed, and how these myths can become intertwined with national identity. The scientific resolution encouraged comparative studies examining how different cultures create, sustain, and eventually dismantle historical mysteries. This broadened the Romanov saga beyond its Russian context, situating it within a global framework of narrative formation. The confirmation provided through DNA analysis also influenced the study of succession crises in monarchies. With the final fate of the Romanov heirs established, political scientists explored how the absence of a surviving claimant impacted the ideological landscape of post-imperial Russia. Succession crises often shape political structures long after monarchies fall, and the Romanov case offered a unique example of how definitive closure can reshape the ideological narratives that follow revolutionary transitions. This inspired new scholarly work comparing the Romanov aftermath to similar upheavals in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, revealing patterns in how societies respond when royal lines come to abrupt ends. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on this DNA revelation? What outcomes do you expect next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.